fame, fortune, millions of fans. WWE superstars have it all. But what happens when they throw it all away? Not because of injury, not because their time is up, but because of one monumentally stupid decision even Vince McMahon couldn't fix. We're talking about main event stars like Alberto Del Rio, who went from selling out arenas to wrestling in high school gyms, all because of one bad choice. From backstage meltdowns caught on camera,
Yeah, I know. I don't know what the to say. I didn't say this.
to social media rants that couldn't be walked back.
It just goes to show you nobody wants to watch that bullshit WWE puts out right now. You know, that product's f***ing horrible.
From substance abuse spirals to ego trips that alienated everyone around them.
Well, you know where to find me, and I'm sure Stephanie has my phone number.
These wrestlers didn't just fumble the ball, they kicked it so far it never came back. So buckle up, because we're diving into the dumbest WWE stars who tanked their own careers in the worst ways possible. Let's begin with the Ultimate Warrior. In the neon-splashed world of late 80s and early 90s, WWE, then WWF, no star burned brighter or ran faster to the ring than the Ultimate Warrior. With his iconic face paint, colorful arm tassels, and superhero physique, Warrior wasn't just a wrestler, he was a comic book character come to life.
Here he is, a true icon in the world of sports entertainment, the Ultimate Warrior.
Kids mimicked his rope shaking, parents bought his merchandise, and Vince McMahon saw dollar signs every time that unmistakable entrance music hit. Warrior's meteoric rise was unlike anything wrestling had seen before. Debuting in 1987, he quickly became the company's second biggest star behind only Hulk Hogan himself. His intensity was unmatched. He didn't walk. He sprinted. He didn't speak. He roared incomprehensible promos about loading the spaceship with rocket fuel that somehow still got fans hyped. His crowning achievement came at WrestleMania 6 in 1990, when he defeated Hulk Hogan clean in the middle of the ring to become both Intercontinental and WWF champion simultaneously. This wasn't just a title change, it was a symbolic passing of the torch. Vince McMahon was betting the company's future on the Ultimate Warrior becoming the new face of WWF. Merchandise flew off shelves. His action figure couldn't stay in stock. The Warrior was positioned to lead wrestling into a new decade. And then, his ego entered the chat. The problems began almost immediately after his WrestleMania victory. Behind the scenes, Warrior, born James Hellwig, became increasingly difficult to work with.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what the to say. I didn't say this. I understand that. Well, no, you don't, because I'm making a videotape to some kid.
But the real turning point came in 1991 before SummerSlam, one of WWF's biggest events of the year. With the show just hours away and fans already filling the arena, Warrior decided it was the perfect time to hold Vince McMahon hostage. He refused to perform unless McMahon agreed to pay him an additional $550,000 plus a more favorable schedule. McMahon, with no time to rewrite the show, reluctantly agreed, but the damage was done. "I'll give you what you want," McMahon reportedly told him, "but you'll never forget this day." It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. McMahon fired Warrior immediately after SummerSlam ended. The muscle-bound superstar had overplayed his hand in spectacular fashion. Though he would return in 1992, the relationship was poisoned, and he was fired again after McMahon discovered he was allegedly using steroids, violating the company's wellness policy. When WCW, WWE's main competitor, finally gave Warrior another chance in 1998, he somehow managed to top his previous blunders. His matches were terrible, his backstage attitude worse, and his bizarre, rambling promos left even the most dedicated fans confused. After a disastrous feud with Hulk Hogan that produced one of the worst matches in wrestling history, WCW cut their losses. But Warrior wasn't done self-destructing. He legally changed his name to Warrior, yes, really, and began giving controversial speeches at conservative colleges. When WWE released a DVD about him titled The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, he responded with unhinged rants that burned whatever bridges might have remained. For over a decade, one of wrestling's most marketable stars had made himself completely unhireable through his own actions. In a surprising twist, Warrior finally reconciled with WWE in 2014, accepting an induction into their Hall of Fame. His speech seemed to indicate he'd found peace, telling the audience, "Every man's heart one day beats its final beat." In an eerie coincidence, Warrior died just 3 days after his induction, collapsing outside an Arizona hotel due to a heart attack. His death transformed his legacy. Fans chose to remember the face-painted hero who inspired them, rather than the difficult man behind the gimmick. The Ultimate Warrior's career remains one of wrestling's great what-ifs. Had Randy Savage, he might have remained on top for years, possibly becoming wrestling's biggest star. Instead, his legacy is one of squandered potential, a cautionary tale of what happens when talent and ego collide in the worst possible way. If Warrior's downfall was fueled by ego, this next wrestler's was pure self-destruction. Alberto Del Rio. Alberto Del Rio arrived in WWE in 2010 as wrestling royalty, literally. Billed as Mexico's greatest export and the Mexican aristocrat, Del Rio, real name Jose Alberto Rodriguez, entered arenas in luxury cars with his own personal ring announcer. With his legitimate MMA background, second-generation wrestling pedigree, and movie star looks, Del Rio had everything WWE wanted in a global superstar. The company saw him as their ticket to expanding in the crucial Latin American market. Del Rio's ascent in WWE was among the fastest in company history. Within his first year, he won the Royal Rumble, a 30-man battle royal that typically establishes a wrestler as a main event player. By the end of 2011, he had already become WWE champion twice.
This is destiny tonight for Alberto Del Rio.
For perspective, most wrestlers spend years, sometimes their entire careers, chasing just one world title reign. Vince McMahon was clearly all in on Del Rio, positioning him as a top heel villain who could work with any babyface hero on the roster. His crisp in-ring work, combined with his aristocratic character's natural arrogance, made him easy to hate. Fans didn't just boo Del Rio, they paid to see him lose. In the wrestling business, that's as valuable as gold. Despite his professional success, cracks began appearing in Del Rio's relationship with WWE around 2013. Backstage rumors suggested he was becoming increasingly difficult to work with. The first major public incident occurred in August 2014 when he was fired for unprofessional conduct, specifically slapping a WWE employee who allegedly made a racist joke. While many fans actually supported Del Rio standing up against racism, the way he handled it, with physical violence rather than reporting it through proper channels, set a concerning pattern. Even so, WWE brought him back in 2015 with a massive contract, showing just how much they still valued his potential. It should have been his second chance. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Del Rio's second WWE run quickly went off the rails. His in-ring work declined noticeably, with many matches appearing lazy and unmotivated. Backstage, he developed a reputation for no-showing events and appearing uninterested when he did show up. The final straw came when he began dating WWE superstar Paige, a relationship that quickly turned toxic and public. In 2016, Del Rio was suspended for violating WWE's wellness policy. Shortly after, he requested his release, which WWE granted. But rather than quietly moving on, Del Rio began a scorched earth campaign against his former employer. In interviews, he attacked Triple H, WWE executive and legend, revealed backstage secrets, and generally burned every professional bridge possible. His post-WWE career became a mess of disturbing headlines, domestic violence allegations, no-shows at independent wrestling events where fans had paid to see him, and bizarre social media videos. In 2020, he was arrested and charged with sexual assault and kidnapping, charges that were later dropped when the accuser didn't appear in court. For promoters, Del Rio had become radioactive, a star whose baggage far outweighed his drawing power. Today, Alberto Del Rio stands as one of WWE's great missed opportunities, a wrestler who had everything handed to him: multiple world championships, feature storylines, massive contracts, and threw it all away through unprofessional behavior and poor personal choices. What makes Del Rio's fall so frustrating is how unnecessary it was. Unlike some wrestlers who lost their careers to addiction or injury, Del Rio's wounds were entirely self-inflicted. WWE had invested millions in making him a global star, pushing him at the expense of fan favorites. All he had to do was show up, perform professionally, and collect his substantial paycheck. Instead, he managed to alienate not just WWE, but virtually the entire wrestling industry. While some burned bridges can be rebuilt in wrestling, an industry famous for forgiveness when money is to be made, Del Rio appears to have demolished his so thoroughly that no major company will touch him. From Mexican aristocrat to wrestling pariah, Del Rio's legacy is defined not by championships won, but by opportunities squandered. While Del Rio's downfall came from personal chaos, the next wrestler's career went off the rails because he couldn't keep his mouth shut, and it cost him everything. Ryback. In 2012, WWE was searching for their next big superstar, a physically imposing monster who could follow in the footsteps of giants like Goldberg and Batista. Enter Ryback, real name Ryan Reeves, a 6'3", 290-pound behemoth with an impressive physique and intensity that made fans take notice.
Congratulations to the big guy. Big congrats to the big guy. Wow.
With his catchphrase, "Feed me more," and his finisher, "Shell-shocked," Ryback seemed destined for superstardom. WWE positioned him as an unstoppable force, squashing multiple opponents in single matches and developing a cult following among fans. Ryback's ascent was swift and dramatic. Debuting his new character in April 2012, he was challenging for the WWE Championship by October, one of the fastest main event pushes in modern WWE history. His matches with then-champion CM Punk drew big reactions, and his merchandise was selling well. In an era where WWE struggled to create new stars, Ryback seemed like a can't-miss prospect. Soon, he was featured in programs with top stars like John Cena and working with legends like The Shield, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose. By 2013, he appeared in the Final Four of the Royal Rumble, signaling the company's long-term investment in his character. A year later, he captured the Intercontinental Championship, traditionally a stepping stone to world title success. The big guy, as he called himself, was living large, with a seven-figure salary and prime positioning on WWE television. Behind the scenes, however, Ryback was developing a reputation for being unsafe in the ring. CM Punk publicly criticized his work, claiming Ryback had injured him multiple times through carelessness.
First night out, gorilla press through a table, misses the table, dumps me on the concrete ground.
This reputation began following Ryback, with other wrestlers reportedly becoming hesitant to work with him. But the real turning point came when Ryback began voicing his grievances publicly. Unlike other wrestlers who handled contract disputes privately, Ryback took to social media and podcasts to air his complaints about WWE's pay structure, creative decisions, and treatment of talent. While some of his points may have had merit, the public manner in which he presented them violated an unwritten rule of professional wrestling: don't break character to attack the company while still employed there. In 2016, as his contract was expiring, Ryback made what would prove to be a career-ending mistake. He went public with demands for all wrestlers to be paid equally regardless of their position on the card, essentially arguing that opening match performers should make the same as main eventers. While this position might find support in some industries, it fundamentally misunderstands the entertainment business, where drawing power directly influences compensation. WWE responded by removing him from television and letting his contract expire. Rather than quietly negotiating or rebuilding his value elsewhere, Ryback doubled down. He renamed himself The Big Guy, since WWE owned the Ryback name, and launched a podcast where he regularly attacked his former employer and colleagues.
I would say if they fired me, they fired me. They didn't. I walked out. I knew what was going on with the contract stuff going on.
His comments grew increasingly bitter and outlandish. He claimed WWE was trying to erase him from history, accused them of manipulating crowd reactions, and even suggested Vince McMahon wanted him to die. When injuries prevented him from wrestling regularly on the independent scene, he turned to selling nutritional supplements and continuing his anti-WWE crusade. Perhaps most damagingly, he began feuding with Mark Henry, a respected veteran, who publicly called him out for being dangerous in the ring and having a bad attitude. When other wrestlers backed Henry's account, Ryback's reputation within the industry was effectively destroyed. Today, Ryback remains on the outside of major wrestling companies looking in. AEW, All Elite Wrestling, WWE's main competitor, has shown no interest despite signing many former WWE talents. His occasional independent appearances draw little little attention, and his once promising career has devolved into social media rants and conspiracy theories. The tragedy of Ryback's downfall is that it didn't have to happen. Had he handled his grievances privately, transitioned successfully to the independent scene, and rebuilt his reputation, he likely could have returned to WWE eventually or found success elsewhere. Instead, he chose a scorched earth approach that alienated not just WWE management, but many of his peers in the industry. For a character whose catchphrase was, "Feed me more," Ryback's hunger for validation ultimately consumed his own career. If Ryback's mouth cost him his career, the next wrestler's downfall was a masterclass in bad timing and even worse contract decisions. Pac. In 2012, WWE signed Adrian Neville, real name Benjamin Satterley, better known to fans as Pac, a high-flying aerial specialist from Newcastle, England. Standing just 5 feet 8 inches, but possessing otherworldly athleticism, Pac could perform moves that seemed to defy physics. His signature Red Arrow finisher, a corkscrew shooting star press executed with perfect precision, left audiences breathless.
Take a break for the Red Arrow. Connecting. That is beautiful.
WWE marketed him as the man that gravity forgot, an apt description for a wrestler who spent more time in the air than on the mat. Pac's journey began in WWE's developmental territory, NXT, where he quickly became one of the brand's biggest stars. In February 2015, he captured the NXT Championship and carried the brand during one of its most critically acclaimed periods. His matches with Sami Zayn, Finn Balor, and Kevin Owens are still considered among NXT's finest. Upon moving to WWE's main roster later that year, Pac faced the typical challenges of smaller wrestlers in Vince McMahon's big man-focused company. However, his extraordinary talent couldn't be denied, and by 2016, he found his groove as the centerpiece of WWE's revamped cruiserweight division. As king of the cruiserweights, Pac, now renamed Neville, elevated the 205 Live brand through his incredible performances and surprising effectiveness as a villain. Wrestling journalists praised him as possibly the best performer in the entire company during this period. Despite Pac's success in making the cruiserweight division relevant, frustration was building behind the scenes. Reports suggested he felt trapped in the division with no path to the main event scene despite consistently delivering the best matches on the card. The turning point came in October 2017 when he discovered he was booked to lose the Cruiserweight Championship to Enzo Amore, a charismatic but technically limited performer who had been moved to the division purely for his microphone skills. For PAC, this was the final straw. After reportedly walking out before a Raw episode, he requested his release from WWE. Unlike others who had done the same, however, Pac made a critical miscalculation. He had recently signed a new contract. WWE, unwilling to set a precedent of releasing talent simply because they were unhappy, refused his request. What followed was a bizarre standoff. PAC simply went home to England, refusing to perform for WWE while still under contract. WWE, in return, refused to release him or use him in any capacity. The result was wrestling's equivalent of career purgatory. PAC was legally forbidden from wrestling anywhere while in his prime years. As months passed, PAC's absence from wrestling entirely was hurting him financially and professionally. While fans chanted his name at WWE events, the company seemed content to let him sit at home rather than grant his release. This standstill continued for over a year, an eternity in the short career span of a professional wrestler, especially one whose style depended on peak athletic condition. By the time WWE finally released him in August 2018, Pac had lost significant momentum and nearly a year of income. In an industry where out of sight, out of mind can be career death, his gamble seemed questionable at best. Surprisingly, Pac's story has a more positive ending than most on this list. Upon regaining his freedom, he immediately returned to the independent scene, particularly with Dragon Gate in Japan, where he rebuilt his reputation and recaptured his ring rust.
The Dragon Gate Network, the only place to see the most sadistic, brutal fighter on the face of planet Earth, Pac, and this shadow of deviance.
In 2019, he signed with All Elite Wrestling, AEW, WWE's new major competitor, where he has been positioned as a main event-level talent. However, the lost year of his prime, when he was arguably the best wrestler in the world, can never be regained. Had Pac handled his frustration differently, perhaps working with WWE management on a compromise or seeing out his contracted dates while negotiating his exit, he might have avoided the career limbo that cost him so dearly. While Pac Pac has landed on his feet, his self-imposed exile serves as a cautionary tale about the risks of contract disputes in professional wrestling. Sometimes even standing up for your worth can backfire if not handled strategically. In an alternate timeline, a more diplomatic approach might have seen Pac become one of WWE's top stars, rather than one of its most notable what-if stories. Pac's career limbo was a matter of poor timing and bad decisions. But this next wrestler's downfall was a public scandal so big, it nearly wiped out his legacy. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan isn't just a wrestler, he's the wrestler. The man who transformed professional wrestling from a regional curiosity into a global entertainment phenomenon. With his 24-inch pythons, iconic red and yellow gear, and larger-than-life personality, Hogan transcended the business to become a household name through the 1980s and 90s. Even non-wrestling fans knew to eat their vitamins and say their prayers. He was WWE's foundation, WCW's game-changer, and wrestling's biggest mainstream crossover star, until he self-destructed in spectacular fashion. Hogan's career achievements read like wrestling mythology. The body slam of 520-pound Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 in front of 93,000 fans.
Professional athlete in the world today. Look at this. He slammed it. I don't believe it.
The formation of the NWO and WCW that launched the Monday Night Wars. 12 world championships across WWE and WCW. Mainstream success in movies like Rocky III and his own reality show, Hogan Knows Best. Hulkamania wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a cultural movement that dominated 2 decades. Beyond championships, Hogan's business impact was unmatched. His star power helped WWE defeat regional competitors nationwide. Later, his shocking jump to WCW in 1994 transformed that company from an also-ran into a legitimate threat that actually defeated WWE in television ratings for 83 consecutive weeks. When wrestling was at its most popular during the Attitude Era, Hogan was still a central figure, despite being well into his 40s. Even into the 2000s, after his prime had clearly passed, WWE welcomed Hogan back as a legend, inducting him into their Hall of Fame and featuring him prominently at major events. His legacy seemed untouchable, his position in wrestling history secure. In July 2015, everything changed. The National Enquirer and Radar Online published excerpts from a secretly recorded sex tape involving Hogan.
You're a hot commodity.
Yeah, right.
While the tape's existence was already public knowledge due to a legal battle with Gawker Media, what wasn't known was the content of Hogan's private conversations on the recording. The audio revealed Hogan, real name Terry Bollea, using racial slurs repeatedly while discussing his daughter's dating life. The language was unambiguous, deeply offensive, and impossible to defend. As the recording spread online, Hogan's 6 decades of goodwill evaporated overnight. WWE's response was swift and unprecedented. They immediately terminated Hogan's Legends contract, removed him from their Hall of Fame, an action never taken before, deleted his profile from WWE.com, pulled all his merchandise, and stopped using him in any promotional materials. Essentially, the biggest star in company history was erased. The financial impact was immediate and severe. Beyond losing his WWE income, Hogan was dropped by numerous sponsors. His reality show projects were canceled, and his public appearances were scrapped. A celebrity who had been welcomed everywhere suddenly found himself unwelcome almost anywhere. The court of public opinion showed no mercy. Longtime fans who had grown up idolizing Hogan felt betrayed. Fellow wrestlers, particularly African-American performers, expressed hurt and disappointment. Booker T, a black wrestler who had once accidentally used a racial slur when referring to Hogan in a promo, noted the painful irony that Hogan had used the same language deliberately in private. For a man whose career was built on telling kids to believe in themselves and do the right thing, the disconnect between the character and the real person seemed impossible to reconcile. The immortal Hulk Hogan had become wrestling's untouchable. After 3 years in wrestling exile, WWE cautiously brought Hogan back in 2018, announcing he had been reinstated to the Hall of Fame after numerous public apologies and behind-the-scenes efforts to make amends.
I'm not a racist. I never should have said what I said. It was wrong. I'm embarrassed by it.
His return received mixed reactions. Some felt he had served his punishment, while others believed some actions couldn't be forgiven. Today, Hogan occupies an uncomfortable space in wrestling history. His contributions to the business cannot be denied or erased, yet his personal failings cast a permanent shadow over those achievements. Documentaries and retrospectives that would normally celebrate his career now must address the controversy alongside the championships. For younger fans who never experienced Hulkamania firsthand, Hogan is often known more for his disgrace than his dominance. His legacy, once destined to be wrestling's undisputed GOAT, greatest of all time, will forever carry an asterisk, a reminder that even the biggest stars can fall if their personal actions betray the values they publicly championed. In a tragic irony, the man who always urged fans to train, say your prayers, and take your vitamins ultimately failed to follow his own advice. Be careful what you say when you think no one is listening. Hogan's fall from grace was a long, painful descent, but the next wrestler's career derailed in a way that was almost comically avoidable. Emma. In the early 2000s and 10s, WWE's women's wrestling was beginning a slow transformation from the Divas era of brief matches and appearance-focused gimmicks toward the more athletic, competitive women's division we know today. Among the performers helping bridge this gap was Emma, real name Tenille Dashwood, an Australian wrestler who debuted in WWE's NXT brand in 2012. With her unique combination of technical wrestling ability and a quirky, bubbly personality, Emma quickly became a fan favorite and seemed destined for long-term success in the company.
And her opponent, from Melbourne, Australia, Emma!
Emma's initial NXT run showcased her as one of the brand's top female performers. Her feud with Paige over the NXT Women's Championship produced critically acclaimed matches that helped prove women could deliver the same quality in-ring work as their male counterparts. Her awkward dancing gimmick connected with audiences, making her both endearing and entertaining, rare qualities for a technical wrestler. In January 2014, Emma was called up to WWE's main roster on Raw. While her initial main roster run didn't reach the heights of her NXT work, she remained a solid mid-card performer with a devoted following. Behind the scenes, she was respected as a reliable worker who continued improving her craft. Even when creative didn't have major plans for her, Emma's future seemed secure as a valuable part of WWE's growing women's division. On June 30th, 2014, Emma's career trajectory changed dramatically at a Hartford, Connecticut Walmart. In what would become one of wrestling's most baffling self-inflicted wounds, Emma was arrested for shoplifting an iPad case valued at approximately $21. The circumstances were particularly strange. Emma was a WWE performer making a comfortable six-figure salary, not someone who needed to steal a low-cost item. According to later reports, she had used the self-checkout system and claimed to have forgotten to scan the item, a mistake she and her legal team argued was unintentional. Regardless of intent, the damage was immediate. News of a WWE star being arrested quickly spread across wrestling and mainstream news sites, creating exactly the kind of publicity WWE works hard to avoid. WWE's initial reaction was dramatic. They announced Emma's release from the company just hours after news of her arrest broke. This unprecedented quick firing for a relatively minor offense sent shockwaves through the wrestling community and suggested the company saw the incident as far more serious than fans might have. In a bizarre twist, WWE reversed course just hours later, announcing they had reconsidered and would instead suspend Emma. While this saved her job, the incident permanently damaged her standing in the company. From that moment, Emma went from rising star to potential liability in management's eyes. The court system ultimately gave Emma a light sentence, community service with the case to be dismissed after completion. But WWE's creative plans for her were noticeably downgraded. She disappeared from television for months, and when she returned, it was with less prominent positioning. Despite trying to reinvent herself with an evil Emma heel character that actually showcased improved in-ring work, she never regained the momentum of her early career. What made the situation particularly frustrating was that Emma's mistake came just as WWE's women's revolution was beginning, a movement she had helped pioneer in NXT but would not get to fully participate in on the main roster. After 3 more years of start-stop pushes and extended absences, WWE released Emma in October 2017. The official reason was creative, having nothing for her. But the shadow of the shoplifting incident seemed to hang over her entire post-arrest WWE run. The true tragedy of Emma's career implosion is its sheer needlessness. A 21-item derailed what could have been a decade-long career in WWE. While she has found success in Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, and the independent scene as Tenille Dashwood, and eventually signed with AEW, she missed the prime years of WWE's women's evolution, a movement she helped start sport but never got to benefit from. Emma's story serves as perhaps the most stark reminder that even small lapses in judgment can have career-defining consequences in WWE. In an industry where perception matters and corporate sponsors demand squeaky clean public images, Emma learned the hardest way possible that $21 can sometimes cost you millions in lost opportunity and legacy. Emma's mistake was small but costly. The next wrestler's downfall, however, was a high-flying disaster that WWE couldn't salvage, no matter how many masks they handed out. Sin Cara. In 2011, WWE was looking to capitalize on the lucrative Mexican wrestling market. Their solution? Import a genuine Mexican superstar. WWE signed Luis Ignacio Uribe Alverde, better known as Místico, one of Mexico's biggest wrestling stars and a box office sensation for the CMLL promotion. Rebranded as Sin Cara without face, Místico entered WWE with unprecedented hype. Vince McMahon personally championed the signing, seeing Sin Cara as potentially the next Rey Mysterio, a masked superstar who could connect with Hispanic audiences while selling masks and merchandise to fans worldwide. WWE spared no expense in presenting Sin Cara as a major acquisition. He received elaborate entrance lighting, special camera effects during matches, and immediate feuds with established stars. Merchandising began before he even had his first match, with Sin Cara masks hitting WWE Shop immediately. The company fast-tracked him to the main roster, bypassing NXT entirely, despite the significant differences between Mexican and American wrestling styles.
We have been waiting for this man for a long time. Sin Cara, the international sensation, the Mexican high flyer.
In Mexico, Místico had been a legitimate superstar, the top draw for CMLL, filling arenas and becoming one of Lucha Libre's most recognizable names. His flying moves and innovative offense had revolutionized Mexican wrestling, and his potential to replicate that success in WWE seemed limitless. The blue-chip prospect appeared destined to become WWE's next global phenomenon. Problems emerged almost immediately. Sin Cara's first WWE match featured a botched dive where he nearly injured himself. This would become an unfortunate pattern. Unlike Mexico, where wrestlers cooperate closely on high spots, WWE's style required more communication and adaptation, something Sin Cara struggled with due to limited English skills. A crucial turning point came when Sin Cara received a 30-day suspension for violating WWE's wellness policy in July 2011, just months after his debut. While WWE didn't specify the violation, the suspension damaged management's trust in their new investment. When he returned, things deteriorated further. Botched moves became more frequent, with Sin Cara reportedly refusing to adapt his style to protect himself and his opponents. The final straw came during backstage incidents where Sin Cara allegedly got into physical altercations with other wrestlers, including a reported fight with Simon Gotch. For a company that expects professionalism behind the scenes, these incidents marked Sin Cara as a problem talent. WWE's solution to the Sin Cara problem was unprecedented. They simply replaced him. Jorge Arias, who had been wrestling as Hunico, was given the Sin Cara mask and character while the original Sin Cara was sidelined. Eventually, the original performer was released entirely, with Arias permanently becoming Sin Cara, a surreal situation where the company essentially admitted failure with their high-profile signing, but tried to salvage the character investment. The original Sin Cara returned to Mexico under his former name, Místico, now Caristico due to CMLL owning the Místico name, while WWE continued with their replacement, Sin Cara. Fans quickly understood what had happened, and the character never recovered its initial momentum. What made this situation particularly embarrassing for WWE was the scale of their initial investment. Sin Cara had been positioned as a cornerstone of their international expansion strategy. Special lighting rigs had been created for his entrances. Marketing campaigns had been built around him. All this for a character that became a punchline among wrestling fans, who used pulling a Sin Cara as shorthand for botching a wrestling move. The replacement Sin Cara struggled under the weight of the character's damaged reputation, never rising above lower mid-card status despite his own considerable talents. What began as WWE's big-money international signing had devolved into a cautionary tale about the perils of rushing talent to the main roster. Today, the Sin Cara character is essentially retired in WWE after the departure of Jorge Arias in 2019. The original Sin Cara Cara returned to success in Mexico, but never again reached the heights that had made him WWE's must-have international signing. The Sin Cara experiment represents one of WWE's most visible talent development failures. A superstar who could have bridged cultures and opened new markets instead became synonymous with botched moves and unrealized potential. While some of the blame falls on WWE's rushed approach to his development, the original performer's unwillingness to adapt his style and his backstage behavior ultimately sabotaged what could have been a historic run. What started as a potential Rey Mysterio-level career ended as a case study in how not to transition international talent to WWE. Sin Cara remains proof that technical skill alone isn't enough. Adaptability and professionalism behind the scenes matter just as much in determining a WWE superstar's longevity. Sin Cara's story was about a missed opportunity to bridge cultures. But what happens when a wrestler's biggest opponent isn't in the ring? It's their own mouth? Scott Steiner. In the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s, few tag teams were as innovative or impressive as the Steiner brothers. Rick and Scott Steiner combined amateur wrestling credentials with explosive power moves to become one of wrestling's most decorated teams. But it was Scott who would undergo one of wrestling's most dramatic transformations. In the late 90s, he dyed his hair blonde, developed a massively muscular physique, and rebranded himself as Big Papa Pump, a loud-mouthed, egotistical genetic freak who quickly became one of WCW's top stars during the Monday Night Wars.
Yes! Go!
Scott Steiner's solo success was remarkable. After years of tag team excellence, he reinvented himself as a singles competitor with an outrageous persona that captured fans' attention. His over-the-top promos, filled with mathematical calculations explaining his 141 2/3% chance of winning, became cult classics. His signature move, the Steiner Recliner, was legitimately painful, and his Frankensteiner finisher showed his remarkable agility for a man of his size.
Can he do it? Is it going to hit him? Oh, the Frankensteiner!
By 2000, Steiner had reached the pinnacle of WCW, capturing the World Heavyweight Championship and establishing himself as one of wrestling's most recognizable characters. When WWE purchased WCW in 2001, Steiner was among the most valuable acquisitions. After waiting for his WCW contract to expire, he debuted in WWE in late 2002 to massive fanfare, immediately entering a program with world champion Triple H. For a wrestler approaching 40, this push represented an extraordinary opportunity, a chance to cement his legacy on wrestling's biggest stage. The turning point for Steiner's WWE run came almost immediately. His highly anticipated match with Triple H at the 2003 Royal Rumble is widely considered one of the worst main event matches in WWE history. Steiner, whose physique had become extremely muscle-bound, appeared winded within minutes. The match was filled with botched moves and awkward rest holds as Steiner struggled to complete basic wrestling sequences. Fans who had chanted his name just weeks earlier now booed the match mercilessly. A follow-up match at the next pay-per-view was equally disastrous. WWE quickly adjusted plans, moving Steiner down the card where his limitations might be less exposed. But backstage, a bigger problem was brewing. Steiner's notorious lack of filter was creating enemies in influential places. While his in-ring struggles were public, Steiner's backstage behavior proved even more damaging to his WWE career. He developed a reputation for being difficult to work with, openly criticizing the company's creative direction and his positioning. Most damagingly, he began taking public shots at Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, the company's heir-apparent leadership.
Weirdos, man. The bullshit you got to put with, and now it's worse because, got one of the biggest cunts run at it, like Stephanie McMahon. What the you know about wrestling,
In interviews and later on social media, Steiner launched increasingly personal attacks, calling Triple H Stephanie's and suggesting he only achieved his position through marriage. These weren't carefully crafted wrestling promos, but genuine, bitter criticism of WWE's power structure. While wrestlers have certainly criticized WWE before, Steiner's attacks were uniquely personal and crude, frequently crossing the line into territory that made him unemployable. By 2004, WWE released Steiner, just 14 months after his debut as a potential main event star. Even after his departure, he continued his verbal assaults on WWE WWE management, burning any bridges that might have allowed for a future return. At one point, things got so heated that Steiner was temporarily banned from attending WWE events even as a fan, following an alleged confrontation with Hulk Hogan's wife at a fan access event. While Steiner did find work in TNA, now Impact Wrestling, his WWE failure meant he would never again perform on wrestling's biggest stage. A potential Hall of Fame induction for the Steiner brothers has been repeatedly blocked, reportedly due to Scott's continued public attacks on WWE figures. What makes Steiner's case particularly frustrating is that much of his downfall was unnecessary. His in-ring limitations might have been managed with shorter matches and a style adjustment, as WWE has done with other older performers. His character was marketable, his catchphrases memorable, but his inability to play the political game, or at minimum, avoid personally insulting the boss's daughter and son-in-law, ultimately cost him millions in potential earnings and damaged his legacy. Rather than being remembered for his peak performances or his revolutionary tag team work, Steiner is now often recalled as a cautionary tale of what happens when burning bridges becomes a personal hobby. For a self-proclaimed genetic freak, Steiner's most remarkable trait may have been his talent for career self-sabotage. This next wrestler, he had everything going for him, until a mix of bad timing and worse decisions sent his career spiraling. Mr. Kennedy. In 2005, a charismatic new character burst onto WWE's SmackDown brand, with his bleached blonde hair, cocky demeanor, and unique entrance gimmick, where he would introduce himself with a microphone descending from the ceiling. Ken Anderson, wrestling as Mr. Kennedy, immediately stood out from the pack. With his raspy voice and natural gift for promos, Kennedy drew comparisons to a young Steve Austin. Vince McMahon, forever searching for the next big mainstream star, quickly took notice of the Wisconsin native. Kennedy's ascent in WWE was meteoric. Within months of his debut, he was working with top stars like The Undertaker and Batista. By 2007, he had captured the United States Championship and won the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania 23, a clear signal that WWE viewed him as a future world champion. The Money in the Bank contract guaranteed Kennedy a world title shot at any time of his choosing within the next year, essentially marking him as a champion in waiting. Behind the scenes, Kennedy had impressed the right people. His promos drew comparisons to The Rock, his in-ring work was solid, and his character connected with audiences. Perhaps most importantly, he had caught the eye of WWE's biggest star, John Cena, who reportedly pushed for Kennedy to be his eventual opponent at a future WrestleMania. At just 31 years old, Kennedy stood at the threshold of superstardom, with every indication that WWE planned to make him a cornerstone of their future. Kennedy's first setback came just days after his Money in the Bank victory, when he incorrectly announced on television that he would cash in his contract at the next WrestleMania, a statement that contradicted the established rules of the contract and required WWE to hastily rewrite storylines. Shortly after, he was sidelined with a triceps injury that was initially diagnosed as requiring months of recovery. As a result, WWE had Kennedy lose his Money in the Bank contract to Edge on an episode of Raw. In a cruel twist, subsequent medical examination revealed Kennedy's injury was much less severe than initially thought, requiring only weeks rather than months of recovery. Had this been diagnosed correctly, he likely would have kept the Money in the Bank contract and his guaranteed path to the World Championship. This sequence of events began a pattern of bad timing and self-inflicted wounds that would define Kennedy's WWE career. Upon his return from injury, Kennedy struggled to regain momentum. Then in May 2009, during a 10-man tag match on Raw, he botched several moves while working with Randy Orton, including a back suplex that Orton felt endangered his already injured shoulder.
Orton getting a little bit lax there for a moment. Don't want to get overconfident because a back suplex.
Orton, one of WWE's top stars and politically connected performers, complained to management about Kennedy's in-ring safety. What might have been a manageable situation exploded when Kennedy gave an interview to the Sun newspaper in the UK. In the interview, Kennedy publicly disputed WWE's wellness policy suspension he had received earlier, claiming he was being punished for a legitimate prescription. He also made comments about WWE's developmental system that were perceived as critical of the company's talent recruitment approach. For a company obsessively protective of its public image, Kennedy's comments represented the final straw. 4 days after the interview was published, WWE released Kennedy from his contract. His outspokenness, combined with the complaint from Orton, had turned a promising career into a cautionary tale in less than a week. Kennedy would resurface in TNA, now Impact Wrestling, as Mr. Anderson, eventually winning their world championship. However, his run there was marred by similar issues. injuries, wellness violations, and eventually a release following allegations of working while impaired. The tragedy of Kennedy's career is how unnecessary his downfall was. His in-ring mistake with Orton might have been survivable had he not publicly criticized WWE's policies. His interview comments might have been overlooked had they not coincided with complaints from a top star. Any one of these issues in isolation could have been overcome, but together they created a perfect storm that ended one of WWE's most promising careers just as it was taking off. Today, Kennedy stands as one of WWE's great what might have been stories, a performer with all the tools to become a generation-defining superstar who couldn't get out of his own way. For a man whose catchphrase involved saying his own name twice, Kennedy managed to make sure WWE would rarely mention it again. Mr. Kennedy's downfall was a case of bad luck colliding with bad choices, but our final entry shows that even the smallest misstep, made with the best intentions, can have lasting consequences. Titus O'Neil. Titus O'Neil, real name Thaddeus Bullard, took an unusual path to WWE. A former college football player at the University of Florida, O'Neil had no prior wrestling experience when he signed with WWE in 2009. But what he lacked in wrestling background, he made up for with his imposing physical presence, 6 feet 6 inches, 270 pounds, natural charisma, and dedication to improving. By 2012, O'Neil had made it to WWE's main roster, first as part of the tag team, the Primetime Players with Darren Young, and later as a singles competitor. While O'Neil never reached main event status in WWE, he carved out a respectable mid-card career. He captured the tag team championships with Young, connected with audiences through his millions of dollars dance routine, and developed into a solid utility player who could be counted on in various roles. Even more impressively, O'Neil excelled outside the ring as one of WWE's most valuable ambassadors. His charitable work was extensive and genuine, reading programs for children, Boys and Girls Club initiatives, and numerous Make-A-Wish appearances. WWE frequently highlighted O'Neil's community service, using him as the face of their corporate social responsibility efforts. In 2015, he received the Mega Dad Award from Niche Media and was named Celebrity Dad of the Year by Rolling Out magazine.
Fatherhood to me, yes, it's a great responsibility, but it's also the greatest honor that I would ever achieve.
By early 2016, while not a top in-ring star, O'Neil had established himself as one of WWE's most respected representatives and a potential candidate for non-wrestling roles in the company's future. His job security seemed rock solid until a few seconds of impulsive behavior changed everything. February 8, 2016. Raw had just ended with an emotional moment, the surprise retirement announcement of Daniel Bryan due to concussion-related issues. After the broadcast concluded, WWE Chairman Vince McMahon led Bryan up the entrance ramp while the roster applauded. It was a solemn, dignified moment until Titus O'Neil made a decision that would live in wrestling infamy. As the wrestlers began filing backstage, O'Neil grabbed McMahon's arm in what he later described as a playful gesture, trying to let ladies go first through the curtain. McMahon, clearly irritated, forcefully shoved O'Neil away from him. While this occurred after Raw went off the air, WWE Network cameras caught the entire incident and the footage quickly spread online. WWE's response was swift and severe. O'Neil was initially suspended for 90 days, a punishment that would cause him to miss WrestleMania 32, the biggest payday of the year for WWE performers. After public backlash suggesting the punishment was excessive, WWE reduced the suspension to 60 days, but maintained that O'Neil had demonstrated unprofessional conduct. The incident became known as the WrestleMania Slide among wrestling fans, a 3-second interaction that cost O'Neil tens of thousands of dollars in WrestleMania pay, significant television time, and any momentum he had built. When he returned from suspension, O'Neil was noticeably de-emphasized on WWE programming, rarely featuring in meaningful storylines. What made this situation particularly frustrating for O'Neil supporters was the seemingly disproportionate punishment for a momentary, non-malicious act. Other WWE performers had received lesser punishments for more serious infractions. The suddenness of O'Neil's fall from valued company representative to cautionary cautionary tale highlighted the sometimes arbitrary nature of WWE's backstage politics. O'Neil never recovered his previous position on the WWE roster. While he remained employed with the company for years afterward, his in-ring opportunities dwindled significantly. He briefly formed Titus Worldwide, a faction that achieved minimal success, before transitioning primarily to ambassador and host roles. Ironically, WWE continued using O'Neil extensively for community outreach and public relations, apparently still valuing his representing the company to outsiders while minimizing his presence on their actual programming. In 2020, he co-hosted WrestleMania 36, and in 2021 was given the Warrior Award in the WWE Hall of Fame for his community service. O'Neil's story offers perhaps the clearest example on this list of how quickly a WWE career can derail. No drugs or legal issues, no controversial statements or wellness violations, simply one ill-timed attempt at playfulness with the boss on the wrong day, in the wrong moment. For a company where "don't touch Vince" should be an unwritten first rule, O'Neil learned the hard way that some mistakes, however minor they might seem, can permanently alter a wrestler's career trajectory. From multi-million-dollar contracts to high school gym shows, from action figures on Walmart shelves to being erased from WWE history, from world championships to cautionary tales. The wrestlers we've covered today had it all, until they threw it away with their own two hands. Let us know in the comments which wrestler you think made the dumbest career-ending mistake. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into wrestling's biggest self-destructions, smash that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the darker side of sports entertainment. Until next time, remember, in WWE, your biggest opponent is often the person staring back at you in the mirror.